Alrighty, so let's move into the next one, which is real problems. So this is an article here from The Guardian about Mark Evans, who he's a former owner of the Harlequins and also Melbourne Storm in Rugby League. And he was discussing the Premiership, Super League Sevens and rugby's future. Basically, overall with what he's... I'll read a bit of the article here. It says, having run champion clubs in both Union and League, Mark Evans, the former CEO of Saracens, Harlequins, Melbourne Storm and Global Rapid Rugby, they came up with a book that examines the foundations of rugby. What he was saying was, I thought COVID would accelerate a lot of changes that hasn't happened yet, but that's reflected in society. We seem to have gone into a pause mode. An awful lot of debt has been incurred and deferred. Clubs have been effectively bailed out by the government, and although it's a low interest, it's still debt for organisations that are already debt heavy. That's allowed both codes to put off changes that they need to make because it wasn't quite as disastrous as most thought. So I think he's also referring here to wage bills and basically overall, yes, he is giving other, like attendance issues and whatnot, but he says attendances have doubled in league and trebled in union, but both have flatlined. Can rugby grow to fill major stadiums? But he's going through a whole list of things here that rugby needs to improve on. What would you say is probably his most important what would you reply to what he's saying right now?
I think it's the big kind of factor of once we can have full crowds back, because I know that the game between the Wallabies and the Pumas and also All Blacks versus Springboks, they were both only allowed 75% attendance, if I'm not wrong, due to the restrictions. But it's going to be that big important factor of trying to get people to go back to these games once they do completely open up. Because at the end of the day, we saw a huge amount of support for the Reds in Super Rugby AU at Suncorp Stadium, which was absolutely awesome to see. And the atmosphere at those grounds as well, it made people want to go to those games to be able to support those sides as well. So I think because of the fact that we have got those restrictions, Bunnings NBC, I know you're 50-50 about me bringing up it as a topic, but they are at the stage only allowed, I believe it's 50 people in attendance at those games. And that was already a competition that wasn't getting huge numbers. So it's one of those ones. Super Rugby is going to be the big deciding point for kind of Southern Hemisphere Pacific rugby of whether or not we can continue to get people to these games, because that is where a lot of your revenue, of course, comes from as well, and just getting people watching them.
I want to say in regards to Super Rugby, no offence to South Africans, but I think this might work out better. I think the Super Rugby Pacific might work out a lot better than what we've had in the past with the likes of the Lions and the Bulls and whatnot, because obviously, with the Brumbies, the Reds, the Waratahs, the Western Force and Melbourne Rebels, alongside the likes of the Crusaders, the Chiefs, the Highlanders, the Blues and the Hurricanes. Obviously, when they go and travel to South Africa, there's 3-4 weeks in a row that you barely get to watch any rugby unless you're like us who get up at these early times. So people can't really get as invested because of the time frame. But with the likes of Fiji and Drua and Moana Pacifica being in, it's all friendly time zones for the Australians and New Zealanders in regards to being invested week in, week out in a team, because you're not going to give a shit unless you're week in, week out supporting a team, right? You don't go a week while they're playing in South Africa and kind of not pay attention to it. You don't have the same feeling if you wake up in the morning and you see, oh, look, we won. It's like, no, that doesn't really make sense. So in regards to the attendances, I actually think that it's going to significantly grow, especially in Australia, if the Wallabies maintain this through the European Tour. If they smash this through the European Tour, Super Rugby will get off to a flying start with the likes of the Brumbies and especially the Reds. The Reds have got a good supporter base now. Melbourne Rebels and Western Force. The Waratahs, they have a core base, but they haven't won a game in legitimately 2 years. In regards to the financials, I really don't understand what his point is, to be completely honest with you. I don't really get it. Like, yes, they've got a lot of debt. Yes, they were going to get a lot of debt. Yes, we're going to continue to get more debt. What do you really want to do right now? Like, what's your point? Like, we couldn't do anything about it. There's a global thing called a pandemic that I'm not too sure. I don't know if you've heard about it, Hamish. It's it's a global pandemic that we kind of been going through for the last year and a half now, 2 years, and I don't actually understand what he's trying to suggest here. Like, what are the clubs meant to do? Not take from the government and go under and then lose everything? Like, just completely collapse as a foundation? And I get that he knows a lot more about it than me from inside and owning these clubs, but I'm just not too sure what he's actually suggesting here.
It's a very tricky one. Like, as soon as it gets into the kind of depth of wages and everything kind of behind the scenes, because I guess he's had a few successful clubs, but then they were probably at times when it was able to excel. Whereas now we're kind of in, like you mentioned, that kind of stale part of trying to work out how to build up out of this. But this has probably gone on a little bit longer than a lot of people.
It should be just about getting through it, though. It should be just about getting through it at this point. You shouldn't be thinking about kind of like, yes, you can think about what's next, but in the same sense, like, it should be just about getting through this ridiculous situation right now, because no one could have prepared for anything like a global pandemic unless you knew about a lab leak. How do you prepare for this kind of stuff?
Exactly right, and it is just one of those ones as well that like we've had probably more rugby than I expected we would have over these times as well, in terms of the amount of travel that some sides. I mean, Argentina's a perfect example. They've been everywhere, and yes, some of them went to Bondi Beach, but that was a different kind of occasion there. But they were still able to play that game as well, kind of thing. So the fact that they can travel all around the world, and it's kind of become a new regular to quarantine for a couple of weeks and then play a game of rugby type thing. Like we saw it with the British and Irish Lions tour, that even though they had no one in attendance for those games, they all took place. And I believe they didn't really have too many cases in those sides during that time. And any time they did, they were able to shut it down nice and early as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes in kind of the future, whether or not World Cup, we will be back to full attendance in stadiums, or whether we will still be kind of at that iffy stage of whether or not people from other countries can make it over there. Because I know yourself, you are heading to France if you are able to, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I'll be going to France, absolutely. I'll definitely be going to France 2023. So, yeah, I definitely look forward to that, and I can't wait for that, because that'll be awesome if I can go.